You want to do it this way, you said, from here? So you just get, because I don't know where,
Take that other stuff out of it.
Michelle, the next one. Yes, all the panel, okay. And if you guys, everyone join in, so be supportive, that would be awesome, because I'm kind of,
Okay.
are we starting? Okay. Okay, so we're going to begin the next segment, and basically what we're doing is a workshop with Yusef Wiley and Toni Welch, and this is about the impact of incarceration on those left behind and those returning home. So it's the families that are left behind when the father or the mother is incarcerated, or the son, or the parent, or the child is incarcerated. And when they're coming back home, the husband coming back home to the wife, or the wife coming back home to the husband after years of being away, how do you reconcile? How do you move forward as a unit, as a family? These are some of the things that are, people are impacted by as a result of incarceration. Okay.
All right. So I just want to kind of like get us going a little bit. I don't want us to be so dry in here, even though it's not ideal for some of us maybe, but I just want to just point out, just to start off, when we talk about generational incarceration, meaning, take for example, introduce yourself again.
My name is Toni Welch.
Toni Welch, a mother, myself being a father during the time that I was incarcerated. So I'm going to say a little bit about that, and then I want to talk about it because there's so many people, so many families been impacted by incarceration. So for myself, even though I went to prison as a young man, at 19 years old, 21 once I was actually convicted, I served 22 years in prison. And that 22 years, so my parents were left to have the experience of having a son incarcerated, and I had two sons, one that was 4 and 2 years old when I went to prison. So it's generational. So they were impacted by my incarceration, as well as my parents, my mother and father, sisters and brothers were impacted by my incarceration. So incarceration doesn't just affect the person that's being incarcerated, but it also affects the family. So I like to say that when you do time, there's actually a picture that one of the organizations that we're affiliated with, they have as their on their t-shirt is a picture of a jail cell, and inside the jail cell a family, meaning that when you go to prison, not only do you go to prison, your family go to prison with you. So you are impacted by incarceration in a way that most of us don't really understand. So I just wanted to start there to give us an idea of where we can go with this. So I want to start by Toni talking a little bit about her story, or saying who she is and how does she fit in the scheme of this problem of mass incarceration.
Like I said, my name is Toni. I served 3 years in a federal prison in California, and I'm from Detroit. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. Actually, my case was out of Detroit, Michigan, but I moved here in 2000. So, and I moved my family out here. And like I said, when he was talking, when we go to prison, we take our whole family. I didn't come from a family of anyone ever being incarcerated. I guess I'm like the little black sheep, I would say, because I grew up with 3 brothers, and then it's just me. And I've always been kind of fascinated about the streets. And I got involved with a longtime boyfriend, and we were indicted in 2005. So it was really devastating to my family, especially to my mom, my dad, and my children. And by being indicted in Michigan, I had to plead, well, not really plead with the judge, like, look, I have family out here, I have my children out here. Can I go to prison out here? So it wasn't until I went to prison how I realized, God, how I'm just not committed a crime. How selfish could I have been? Because I was so selfish because it affected my whole family. It's like I took them all and took us home. And that's when I realized it's something that has to be done. You know, we need to come out and help and figure out something, you know, because they were so affected. They have to do everything for you because you no longer have control over your life. Nothing, you don't have control over anything. You're just there. You're just the number now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like he said, 22 years, I couldn't imagine putting that on my family, but 3 years, your time is your time, and it affected my family a lot. I left too, and when you're incarcerated, if you're a mother or family, you have children, it can affect your children. 70% of kids, families that are incarcerated, especially mothers, one of their children, out of their children, somebody else is going to be incarcerated. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with me. My oldest son ended up being incarcerated on a case that I was on, and he did 11 years, and he just came home in June. So being a parent in prison and a son in prison, then I have a family, and I have 2 sons that I left in California. It was really devastating. And they were young men, so you can imagine the effects that it had on my whole family. So that's what I talk about.
Thank you. So, have any of us ever thought about the term prison or penitentiary, where it come from, where it stemmed from? Can anybody tell me? No? Yes.
I actually was just reading about this. I'm reading this book about the history of prisons in California, and it said that it comes from penitence, like a religious penitence.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Penitence. Penitence means to repent. Right? Everybody knows what that means, right? We have different terminologies that we use for it in different faiths, but penitence and cell. You know, a jail cell was actually a place where you go to ask for forgiveness, to be reformed, to actually be reformed, to be rehabilitated. So the idea of penitentiary or penitence actually come from the concept of to be reformed. But we know prisons in the United States doesn't produce that. Right? So when you go to jail or prison, oftentimes you become more criminalized. You become more, you know, if you don't seek out that reform within yourself, you're not going to get it from the result of being incarcerated. So mass incarceration, as we understand it today, is something totally different than what it was originally intended for when the whole concept of prison and cell was formed through a religious idea of going into a cell, you know, reciting various verses from the scripture and being reformed as a result of it, and going and being let free. So one of the things that I've done is I've researched some of the other you know, prison industrial complexes in other countries. You know, when you look at Germany and especially in Europe, their concept and philosophy of jail and prison is totally different. You know, they actually have weekend passes where they go to their family. They actually encourage family reunification by, no matter what you went to jail for, they have a process in which you learn a trade, education, and you go to work outside the prison, and you have the ability to spend time with your family on the weekend. Then you come back to the prison. And the inside of the prison, it looks totally different than the prisons that we see here in the United States. So the whole idea is the process of going through that experience is totally different. Once they come home, they're actually reformed. They actually, so their prison population is actually much less, and it's constantly declining, right? So I just wanted to mention that. And as Toni was saying about, you know, going to jail, myself going to jail, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I wasn't innocent. I wasn't an innocent person when I went to jail as a young man. I was raised here in Los Angeles in the 80s when it was gangs. I mean, the Crips and Blood wars and things like that was happening in Los Angeles. I was a part of that whole, you know, crazy cycle. And when I went to prison, like I said, at 1921, when I was convicted, I was 42 years old when I was released. By that time, my sons were already, you know, grown, you know, just almost turning 30 years old. My sons, 2 sons right now. I have actually 11 grandkids now. So during the time I was incarcerated, you know, my 2 sons got married, had children, and you know, it's devastating, the effect, the impact. They've been involved in and out the system, the social service system, you know, because of the absence of a father being there. But I do want to say this, even though I, you know, accept responsibility for the crime that I committed as a young man in the 80s, I do look at the education factor and access to education for black and brown people in this country. And I feel like that played a major role because that was my actual rehabilitation. My transformation happened as a result of my education. So during the time I was incarcerated and I started studying history, you know, African American history, world history, all of these things that I had access to for free because I was incarcerated, I didn't have when I was outside. So I took college courses. I had access to college courses, Pell Grants, all of these things that were available while I was in prison. And can anybody tell me how much it costs to incarcerate someone in the state of California a year? It's probably close to $70,000. It was the last I checked, it was $67,000 a year to keep someone incarcerated in the state of California. Just imagine, that's tuition, right?
Yeah.
Why not send us to college? So being raised in a community where, you know, during the 80s, during the Contra scandal, anybody familiar with the Contras, right? When cocaine, rock cocaine hit the street, right in my prime, right when I was in the midst of, you know, that transition from middle school, junior high school to high school was when crack cocaine, rock cocaine, we used to call it rocks then, we didn't call it crack, hit the street of Los Angeles, Compton, Watts, just overnight. It was literally overnight. I'm telling you, it was literally overnight when we seen the rocks and the cocaine. I could tell you from direct experience of what that was like in the 80s when cocaine devastated our communities. Because prior to that, just prior to that, it was the, you know, it was the music era for a lot of us. You know, pop locking, you know, breakdancing. Remember all of that stuff? That was actually, you know, it was art and culture was actually developing in the early 80s. But when the Contra scandal started taking place, when all of the cocaine came to the street, it was our parents. Many of our parents were the ones that became addicts. It was our parents that became the drug addicts. Not my parents per se, because I'm the baby of my family, so my parents are older. They're a generation up. But it was a generation under them that was devastated by addiction from rock cocaine coming into the community. And that's when everything changed. That's when gangs took on a whole new meaning because the gangs took over the drug wars, the wars on drugs, and all. Remember, all of that was happening around the same time. The war on drugs, the war on gangs, all of that, all happened around the same time as a result of cocaine coming into the community. So the public school system was devastated because it was during that same time, the Reagan and Bush administration, when they removed all of the arts from the public school system. So we no longer had, you know, the bands, learning how to play instruments and all. I had a drum set as a kid, so I was into music. Prince was like one of my favorite, you know, artists, right? All of this changed. I could give you a vivid picture of how it changed, you know, right in front of me. And I'm now walking down the street with a bag of cocaine to sell it to somebody. And oftentimes it was someone that, oh man, that's my friend's mom, you know, that's buying the drugs, right? And that's when you seen a slew of us going to prison. Starting with juvenile hall in the 80s, about 84, 85, 86, to prison in 87, 88, when AK-47s hit the street after a lot of the guns that were being taken from the wars that was happening in Central America, right? And being exported, where AK-47s all of a sudden hit the streets in 87, 88. Right? It was no longer the, you know, shotguns and little pistols, 22s. It was big guns, big heavy artillery, AR-15s landed in the hands of gang members, right? And that's when you started hearing about drive-by shooting. That's when drive-by shootings started. So all of the people of my generation that went to jail and prison during that time, all of us, because they have numbers in the state of California, you get a number and it's a letter in front of it. So all of the letters in front of it at the time, before I came to prison, was like C and D numbers. It was C and D, but that went on for years, where people had C and D numbers in prison. But because of the Contra scandal, all of that stuff that was happening in the 80s during the Reagan and Bush administration, everybody that started coming to prison, they started giving out E and H numbers. So the mass majority of people that went to prison in the 80s for gang violence, Crips and Blood wars, the Mexican wars in the 80s, I guarantee you they had an E number or an H number. And those numbers, we went through those numbers so fast in the 80s, right? Into the early 90s, in the J numbers, J and K numbers. What was their number?
H66509.
See? This is somebody that's a part of our social enterprise now that we have, where we employ the formerly incarcerated. He was somebody that got caught up in the same cycle. He did 24 years. He has an H number, you see? So all of us have E and H numbers. And then they went to J and K. So if you look at, if somebody just, that would be an actual nice project to do the research, to see how many people got E, H, J, and K numbers, and see how many of them were gang members in the 80s, and how many of them was in prison for rocks and crack cocaine. It's thousands. I'm telling you, it was thousands. That would be some awesome research to do. You know, to figure out, and then where are they now? Where are all those people now in terms of their family, their parents, as well as their children, right? Where are they right now? Right? Because that's when they started having the concept of crack babies. Remember that term? Crack babies. So the crack babies were the babies that were born in the 80s to a mother that was addicted to crack cocaine, that was probably born in 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, right? Those are the kids now that's going to prison or devastating the community today, that's involved in illegal activity, now human trafficking, right? The human trafficking, prostitution, all of that stuff that's happening now. So I just wanted to give you a little history, because I mean, to me, it makes up what we see in Southern California, you know, LA. A lot of the gang activity, all of the things that you see, a lot that you see was a result of that period of time, is where you've seen that major shift. And how are they trying to reclaim it now? Do we know what's happening now to try to fix it? I'm just throwing that out there for us to talk a little bit about that. Do we see what's happening right now in Los Angeles that's impacting that generation? It's a new term they use now. They're using it in the Bay Area as well. I hear it a lot. Starts with a G. Starts with a G. That's
Gentrification.
He said it. Gentrification. Gentrification. So the way that they reclaim the neighborhoods, the communities, is through, to try to rebuild the neighborhoods in our communities, is by cost of living going that way, right? When people like us, you know, we didn't go to college, or you know, we don't have a UCLA education, you know, you're going to end up pushed out somewhere in the valleys. Now it's not even the valley, they pushing you out a lot farther, right? Maybe Bakersfield, Nevada, Las Vegas, right? Everybody moving to Las Vegas, Moreno Valley, you know, those places, just to, you know, they can't live here anymore, we can't afford it. So the gentrification is one of the ways that we see now that our communities and neighborhoods, you know, and all of this, like I said, is mass incarceration. That's what was happening, you know, during that time, was mass incarceration. So that's this segment that we are here talking. I just wanted to put a few things out there just to create this dialogue and conversation, to get you guys feedback of what you guys think about, you know, this whole idea of mass incarceration now as we see it today. Because I kind of ended on this stuff, and then we can kind of go back and forth. In 2011, the state of California passed AB 109, a bill here, which started shifting what the devastation of what I just talked about of the 80s, where everybody was just being incarcerated, and now the prisons are so full to where it's like, you know, I'm telling you, during the time I went to prison, when we went to prison, it was about 6 or 7 prisons in the state of California. By the time we got out, by the time we was getting close to the guy, it's 34 prisons. One state, we talking about one state. You know, it's more prisons in the state of California than countries have. You know what I'm saying? Than countries. This is just a state. So the mass incarceration that was taking place here in California was huge. Through maybe 3 governors. It was Pete Wilson, Gray Davis, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So during that period of time, everybody was just being incarcerated. Private prisons, boom, you know, industry blew up. And so when AB 109 was passed, the whole idea was to reduce the prison population in the state of California as a result of a lawsuit that was filed because of the mental health crisis inside the prison system, because, you know, the prison became, you know, a warehouse for the mental health crisis that was happening too, as a result of all of this stuff that we're talking about.
But they closed the mental health hospitals.
Yes, yes.
That's why they were on the streets, so they could do
Yes.
Not even just in Los Angeles. I'm from
everywhere,
Michigan.
every
Yeah.
state, Michigan too.
Every state. They have closed them.
Yes.
So just to get back to a little bit about myself, I started an organization called Silent Heart, and it's an organization for children of incarcerated parents. I like when I ended up in prison. When I said not to be like I was almost lucky. I was lucky to get 3 years. I got 57 months, but in federal prison they started a drug program, and that drug program will give you some release off your time. So I got 18 months off my sentence. But why I say I was lucky, because I've always kind of, like I said, the allure of the streets, I've always wanted to be in the streets. And I can't even explain why, you know, because I didn't come from that type of home. But coming from Detroit, so you either, like I said, prostitution, you're either in drugs, or your family worked at the factory, or it's a blue collar state. I was allured to that, you know, that highlight. I almost was living a double life. And not seeing the effects of my double life. I worked, I had my 3 children, but besides work after 5 o'clock, it was on for me. It was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I sold drugs. It wasn't any kind of drugs that I haven't never sold. Out of all that time, I'm 55 now, and all those years that I had been in that life, I've never gotten caught up in anything. And the case that I got caught up on was a really high major case. You know, it was 136 people from different states that was indicted, and it was a big drug organization. And at that time when I was indicted, I didn't realize, wow, why was I indicted? Because I didn't feel like I got caught up on anything. And what I had to do, I had to go to prison to realize that just because I didn't get caught up on this, I had did something all my life. So I felt lucky that I was only sentenced to 57 months, because when I walked into those prison doors, it was so many women in that prison that it was like, wow, I didn't even know. You know prison exists, you know that world